monsters who tortured, killed, and terrorized millions of people, yet their names barely appear in textbooks. Tonight, we reveal 10 lesser-known figures whose cruelty is almost too horrifying to imagine. Some were emperors, some generals, even a scientist, but all of them share one thing in common: they were pure evil. And by the end, you'll be questioning everything you were taught about history. Let's begin. 10. Shiro Ishii, the butcher scientist. During World War II, Japan ran a secret program called Unit 731, a laboratory of death. Shiro Ishii, the lead scientist, turned human beings into live test subjects. Prisoners were frozen solid, then thawed alive to study frostbite. Children were deliberately infected with plague and watched as they suffered agonizing deaths over days. People were dissected without anesthesia, sometimes while still alive. Thousands perished under his experiments, and Ishii walked free, protected by the US in exchange for his data. But if Ishii killed with science, the next man killed with death marches and starvation on a massive scale. 9. Enver Pasha, the ghost of the Ottoman Empire. Enver Pasha helped orchestrate the Armenian genocide, yet few remember his name. 1.5 million Armenians were marched across deserts with no food, water, or shelter. Villages were burned, families executed in front of each other. Women and children were enslaved, raped, and starved, while men were shot on the spot. Enver's paranoia and lust for power left an entire population in ruins. And while Enver hid his crimes behind military orders, the next dictator allegedly ate his enemies alive and slaughtered children for sport. 8. Jean-Bedel Bokassa, the cannibal emperor. Bokassa crowned himself emperor of the Central African Republic with a $20 million ceremony. While his people starved, he allegedly fed prisoners to his lions. Children in his schools were beaten to death for minor infractions. Entire families disappeared, murdered for his amusement. Bokassa's palace was a playground of gold, diamonds, and blood, a grotesque display of unchecked power. But Bokassa wasn't the only ruler to murder millions. Leopold II turned an entire African colony into a human slaughterhouse. 7. Leopold II of Belgium, the forgotten Holocaust. Leopold II didn't just colonize the Congo. He owned it as his personal kingdom, where terror was normal life. Workers who failed rubber quotas had their hands cut off and sent to Leopold as proof. Villages were burned, families executed in front of children. By the time his reign ended, an estimated 10 million Congolese were dead. Europe still celebrated him with statues, but history hides the horror. If Leopold ruled with terror and mutilation, Ranavalona the Fur, the next ruler, ruled with poison and paranoia, killing over 100,000 of her own people. 6. Ranavalona Thwain, the Mad Queen of Madagascar. Known as the Mad Queen, Ranavalona executed anyone she suspected of betrayal. The Tangina ordeal forced accused witches to drink poison. Thousands died agonizing deaths. Political opponents were burned alive or forced into grueling labor until death. Her paranoia and cruelty left Madagascar drenched in blood. But while Ranavalona killed with fear, Lothar von Trotha used European military precision to annihilate entire tribes. 5. Lothar von Trotha, the blueprint for the Holocaust. In 1904, von Trotha issued an extermination order against the Herero and Nama people in Namibia. Entire tribes were driven into deserts with no water, dying of thirst. Anyone who survived the sun and thirst was executed on sight. Women and children were not spared. The land was littered with corpses. Historians call this the first genocide of the 20th century, a blueprint for Hitler decades later. But not all killers used armies. Some, like Thomas Migley Jr., killed millions invisibly, through science itself. 4th, Thomas Migley Jr., the man who poisoned the world. Thomas Migley may have worn a lab coat, but his creations killed more than most armies. introduced leaded gasoline, causing neurological damage to millions, developed CFCs, destroying the ozone layer and endangering generations. Called the man who had more impact on the atmosphere than any other single organism, he weaponized science against life itself. But if Migli poisoned the environment, Yaqub Beg enslaved entire populations and massacred anyone who opposed him. 3. Yaqub Beg, the tyrant of Xinjiang. Yaqub Beg ruled Xinjiang with terror, enforced slave-like labor, chaining men and women for grueling work. Families who resisted were slaughtered or sold into slavery. Entire ethnic groups were massacred, and his paranoia kept citizens in constant fear. Western explorers called him a hero, but locals remember a tyrant bathed in blood and fear. Bela Kun would take terror to a new ideological level, killing thousands with ruthless efficiency. 2. Bela Kun, the Red Butcher of Hungary. In 1919, Kun unleashed the Red Terror in Hungary. Tens of thousands were executed without trial, including children and the elderly. Pregnant women were sometimes killed to terrorize communities. Later, in the Soviet Union, Kun orchestrated mass purges that killed tens of thousands more. Few know his name, but his reign rivals the most infamous tyrants in history. And now, the final figure, Tamerlane, built mountains of human skulls as monuments to his victories. 1. Tamerlane, the Skull King. Tamerlane, or Timur, conquered Central Asia and Persia with unimaginable brutality. Cities that resisted him were slaughtered completely, survivors impaled on spikes. He built pyramids of 70,000 human skulls as symbols of terror. Campaigns across Persia, India, and Central Asia killed an estimated 17 million people, roughly 5% of the world's population. Even Genghis Khan couldn't match the sheer terror he inflicted. If history hides monsters like Tamerlane, Bokassa, and Ishi, what other atrocities have we been taught to forget? These 10 figures prove that evil doesn't always make the history books. Sometimes, the most horrifying monsters are the ones history forgot. If you want more shocking truths and stories that will haunt you, subscribe now, because the darkest corners of humanity are still waiting to be revealed.